I love my drum sander. It gives me a flawless finish every time, and it saves me hours of hand sanding. Let me rephrase that a moment. I hate my drum sander. It goes out of alignment just by looking at it, so one side of my panel ends up thinner than the other. I get a burn line down it when the sandpaper gets clogged, and it's all too easy for it to stall, and I end up with a line across my panel. Let's see if we can get this baby fettled. Welcome to Workshop Essentials. I've had this machine for over 20 years, but it doesn't get a great deal of use because it's so difficult to set up properly. The biggest problem is keeping the drum parallel with the bed. It is adjustable, of course, but the adjustment is very crude. There's a knob over here at the back, but it's very close to the pivot point, only that far away. And the end of the drum here is that far away. So a small change at the end there results in a huge change here. 1 millimeter there, 7 millimeters here. And when I'm trying to get it aligned, not millimeter perfect, but thou perfect, it's not very user-friendly. So let's see about setting this up. There are 4 bolts to slacken off, 2 on this side and 2 on the other side, which are a little more difficult to get at. And it pivots on these back pair here, which means that the cylinder can now pivot up and down like that. And we need to make sure that it's parallel to the bed. Easier said than done. So I'm going to put a piece of plywood underneath like that. And I've got a piece of veneer, and I want this veneer to work as a feeler gauge. So under here, it's not being stopped by the sandpaper roller, but over here it is, which means it's tipping down this way. So we need to screw in the knob, wind it up a bit, and this will raise the far end. Aha! Okay, now let's lower it a bit, just a bit. And keep lowering it until one of these catches. That's catching there. That's not catching there, so we need to come up a wee bit. Wind it up a bit.
As you can see, this process of iteration is slow and tedious. The main problem here is the mechanical advantage of the adjuster knob.
I think we need to come down just a wee tad. Now let's raise the whole bar. And that kind of feels right. And so now we tighten up these 4 bolts again. Once I'd got the drum alignment sorted out, I decided to take the belt off and give it a good clean. It was absolutely filthy, it really was. Now, I had done this job once before. When this machine was new, it came with a grit belt, and I upgraded to a rubber one. But that was 20 odd years ago, and I've been to bed since then, and I have no recollection of how I did it. I just know that I did do it. So I figured, just by looking at it, all I had to do was slacken off the tension, remove these 2 nuts, bolts, and then slide the belt off from the side here. Well, I struggled and I struggled and I struggled, and I couldn't get it off, and I couldn't see what was stopping it, and I said lots of rude words. Eventually, I got the thing removed. And then I could see, I could see how it all fitted together. So it's actually very simple. It's very easy to do in just a few minutes, not an hour and a half. So I'll show you how to take this off for cleaning so that you don't make the same mistakes that I made. To remove the drive belt for cleaning, we have to slacken off these two nuts here. There's one at each side. And there's a built-in spanner on mine, which is handy. So we'll just slacken that off.
I said that the built-in spanner was handy. In fact, it's awkward and a bit of a pain. It would be much better to just have a bolt to jack the two pieces apart, using an ordinary spanner with easier access. So I've modified mine to do just that.
This had already got a 7mm hole in it, so I'm tapping it out to M8.
4. Because you want
I'm not
to.
talking to you, I'm talking to the camera.
Oh.
This is
Yeah, the camera can ask you that question, isn't it? Why? What are you doing that for?
This has already got a 7mm hole in it.
Take 4.
Will you shut up? And then we remove these 4 bolts. This is new today, and look at it. It's bent. And there's 2 at the back as well. And now that should just lift off. There we go. That just comes out like that. Ooh. And that's what it looks like underneath. Then we remove one of these brackets. Comes ça, and out comes the roller. And now we've got all the slack that we need to pull that belt off. And then that, if it was dirty, I've already cleaned it once, that could go and be washed. So to put it back on, we feed it on at this end, like that. And this block here is magnetic, and it just fits in there to guide the edge of the belt. If I can get my fingers in, just goes in there. Good. And then we just reinstall the bolts. Right, well, with that support bracket pushed in as far as it will go, that goes underneath there. I've put a dab of oil in on the ends of the spindles like that, and that goes into there. That goes into there, and then we can put this in the same way on this side. Screw that right in. I've not got my tap in quite straight there, look. It's going off at a funny angle. I'm a better woodworker than I am an engineer. And then we just put the tension back. This is where I tap this out, of course, to M8, because using an ordinary spanner instead of that encapsulated little tinny spanner is much better. It would be better if this lock nut was on the inside, but there isn't actually room for it in there when you slip. There is when it's tensioned, but then it gets in the way when you try to detension it. I found that out the hard way. Which way am I going? Yes, I'm jacking out, aren't I? And finally, just tighten these up. And when you know how, it really is that quick. One other thing that you need to check occasionally is the rise and fall mechanism at the back. Lowering the cylinder is easy because it's heavy, but raising it, it's really quite hard work. So make sure the glides are lubricated and adjusted so that it is fairly easy to rise and fall, but without any play whatsoever. I've never had to adjust this. This is exactly how it was set at the factory. I have had to adjust one in another workshop. It wasn't mine, but I've never needed to touch this. It's been great from the start. And while we're doing the lubricating at the back here, don't forget to give the ends of the rollers where they pivot. There's 2 pressure rollers under here, which I can't film. I've tried and it's rubbish. But you can just get a little bit of lube on the pivot points. Don't forget to shield your nice high friction rubber. You don't want lubrication on that. That's the last thing you need. And just a little bit where the pivots are, and they should work very nicely. The last job is to put a new sanding strip on, and there are 2 clips, one at each end. There's a little lever here and it's really stiff. It actually hurts my thumb a bit, but you pull that back and take the end of the sandpaper strip out like that, and then just unwind it until we get to the far end. And the same one here, just mind your fingers. And we make the new one as a direct copy of the old one. So we've got our new sandpaper here, and my old one goes on top. It's really important that you get the angle on the right side. If you do it left-handed, you're going to end up in a mess. So that goes on there like that. And we'll just mark it with a pen. And that's the bit that's coming off, of course. And then we just have to cut it, which doesn't do your Stanley knife very much good at all. And it's even harder when you've only got one eye. Roll on next week. I should be dual-eyed again. And this is where I discover I've lost my Stanley knife. No, I haven't. Here we are. Right. It does rather knacker the blade, but there we go. At least we've got a clean line. That's good. And then we'll just turn it over. Oh, I wish I could see properly. I really do. Somewhere there.
I keep calling this sandpaper, but in fact it is cloth backed rather than paper backed. It is important to use the good stuff, designed for machine sanding. I once worked in a shop where they used cheap paper stuff and it was forever ripping. I had all on persuading them that the problem was the quality of the abrasive. You can buy it ready cut with the pointy ends, but it's quite an expensive way to do it. If you buy a 25-metre roll like this, it works out at about £2 a metre, so that's not too bad. And there's enough here to last me for the rest of my life.
Right, at long last, there we go. That took longer than it should have done. So now, we pick the old one up off the floor where it's fallen, and we clip the two together. And we simply unwind it. Now then, I've got the reel in its original, but this is a new pack, and I'm unrolling it from the middle so that it doesn't go everywhere. But it does mean that you have to keep twisting it as you pull it out. So we'll just keep pulling and twisting.
I've usually got P80 or P120 grit on my machine. Going any higher results in clogging of the sandpaper. But once the panel is flat to P120, it's then quite an easy task to finish sanding by hand.
So we lift the spring clip and we put that in until it catches, and make sure that it's in with a little bit to spare. It doesn't have to fill the groove, but so long as you know that that's not going to come out. And then wrap it round nice and tightly. Now, in an ideal world, they would all the turns would just touch with no gaps and definitely not overlapping. So let's try and make sure they don't overlap. That goes there like that. And just keep going nice and tight, nice and evenly until we get to the other end. And then you just have to get it into the right place behind that very awkward clip at the back. But when it's in, it catches nicely. There we go, like that. And then if you need to make it a bit tighter, you can pull it through.
Right, well, let's give it a whirl, because the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
First of all, I'll put my workpiece underneath and lower the drum until it just begins to catch, like that. And then feed it out. And then we attach some extraction. Very important, it comes up like a volcano if you don't, and you'll have a room full of dust. And then we start the air, start the cylinder, start the feed. Air, cylinder, feed.
If the drive belt slips underneath the workpiece instead of carrying it through, it implies that I'm taking too heavy a cut. And it's particularly important to take light cuts when the panel is wide, because there is more resistance.
It's taking more off the sides than in the middle, but it's getting there. It's getting there. The roller's slipping a bit, look. Which implies that these need tightening up just a little bit. And the same over here. Well, that's come out very nicely. All my pencil lines have disappeared. And there's just a little bit there that needs doing. I mean, this is 120 grit, so this will need to be done to, 180 and 240 before oiling. But I'm quite pleased with that. It's pretty flat, actually, whichever way you look at it. There's no rock. There's no serious visible air gaps. And it's not bad on wind either. Good, pleased with that. 17.5 millimeters. Will you turn it over, please, Bob? 17.5 millimeters. Excellent. That's probably the best it's ever been. Perfect. And that, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is one very nicely fettled Performax 1632 Plus drum sander. Thank you very much for watching. And if you know somebody who's got one of these, why not send this video on to them? Like, subscribe, and share. It's the only way these films get seen. Until the next time, enjoy your workshop. Cheerio.